Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today we're exploring the harrowing, high-stakes reality of the global underground organ trade. It's this shadowy underworld where human bodies are literally treated as products to be harvested, trafficked, and sold to the highest bidder. And as we'll see from the incredibly deep reporting in our source material today, this red trade isn't some science fiction movie plot. It is a very real, thriving global black market. To really wrap our heads around how this black market works, we have to start with a pretty chilling statistic. The mortality rate for patients waiting for a legal organ transplant in the US can actually exceed 50%. I mean, just think about that for a second. It's a staggering number. Imagine essentially flipping a coin for your life while waiting for a phone call that might never actually come. This intense scarcity is exactly the fertile ground where the illicit organ trade takes root. Section 1, the desperate demand, a massive deficit. Just think about the massive deficit we're dealing with here. Back in 2020, while just over 39,000 Americans received transplants, a massive backlog of over 100,000 patients just languished on a waiting list. And because of this stark imbalance, 17 people are dying in the United States every single day waiting for an organ. That extreme bottleneck creates an incredibly powerful incentive for anyone with means to start looking outside the legal medical framework. And behind all those cold, hard numbers are actual people fighting for their lives. Take Garrett, for example, a dialysis patient featured in our source material. Garrett spends 9 hours every single night hooked up to a machine just to stay alive, and his kidneys have less than 3% functionality left. He faces an average 7-year wait on the transplant list. Hearing his story illustrates perfectly why a patient's sheer will to live might eventually completely overpower their judgment of right and wrong. When your only alternative is a slow decline, the ethical lines of how you get an organ can start to blur very, very quickly. Section 2. Supply Chain Logistics, the biological clock. Now, moving an organ is absolutely nothing like smuggling drugs or weapons. You are fighting a grueling 36-hour ticking biological clock from the moment of extraction to the transplantation. The organ has to come from a live donor or a body that has literally just died. And this forces cartels and smuggling rings to operate with a terrifying, almost unbelievable efficiency. We're talking about utilizing specialized go-fast boats and highly coordinated international smuggling routes just to ensure the product doesn't expire before it reaches the buyer. Section 3. The Colombian Pipeline, Cartel Smuggling Routes. Down near the treacherous Darién Gap, which is this massive choke point for global migration, a truly dark, opportunistic model has popped up. Our sources uncovered cartel operatives who go by the terrifying title of recolector. Translated, that means someone who tears apart cars. But in this context, they are allegedly tasked with harvesting human organs. It's a brutal murder and theft model. They allegedly target vulnerable, undocumented migrants who get stuck in transit, completely off the grid, leaving absolutely no trace behind. Section 4. Cartels in Mexico, Medical Complicity. It's a complete night and day difference when you look at how these cartels operate. While the Colombian pipeline relies on the brutal, raw theft of organs from victims out in the jungle, Mexican cartels have developed a highly organized, medically integrated pipeline. It's a huge shift from raw violence to calculated coercion, and it heavily relies on the complicity of licensed medical professionals. Here is how that Mexican operation actually functions step by step. First, cartel scouts actively hunt for potential donors, often zeroing in on poor or highly vulnerable individuals. Then, you have this dark collaboration where organized crime bosses work hand in hand with complicit doctors. These doctors run legitimate blood work and compatibility exams to match donors with wealthy foreign buyers. After that, the extractions take place in fully equipped clandestine clinics. Now, you might be thinking, maybe this Mexican model is simply a consensual, if completely illegal, transaction between poor sellers and rich buyers, right? Well, this chilling admission from an imprisoned cartel boss shatters that illusion completely. He openly admits that violent coercion is a foundational element of their whole supply chain. They aren't just facilitating willing sellers. When there is a lucrative match, they are forcing people to give up their organs. No way around it. Section 5. The wealthy buyers, following the money. Our source material actually introduces us to a guy named Juan. He's an American diabetes patient. Faced with a failing body and what felt like an endless waiting list, Juan just bypassed the legal medical system entirely by paying over $500,000 to a cartel connection for a pancreas transplant. Let that number sink in for a minute. Over $500,000
funneled directly into the pockets of organized crime simply to secure a biological necessity.
And when Juan was pressed on whether his new pancreas came from someone who was coerced or maybe even murdered, his defensive response is incredibly telling. He says, "I don't care. I don't know nothing. I don't want to know nothing. I just have the money and I did it." This perfectly highlights the willful ignorance required by wealthy buyers. To secure their own survival, they actively choose to look the other way, ignoring the horrific human cost and the extreme violence their money is directly funding. Section 6. The ultimate ethical dilemma: survival versus morality. Ultimately, it becomes really clear that this horrifying red trade is actually just a symptom of a much larger disease, right? An incredibly inefficient legal medical system. The black market only thrives because the white market is failing to meet the demand. Our society has a massive obligation to fix these legal transplant pipelines, because as long as thousands of desperate patients are left without hope, cartels are going to be right there, ready to sell them a lifeline. As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a provocative thought that sits right at the heart of all this. It's super easy to judge the buyers from a distance, but if the system completely failed you, if you or your child were facing certain death and you had the money to stop it, how far would you go to survive? Thank you for exploring this deeply complex issue with me today.